And we have somebody online who has signed in on an iPad. I'm wondering if you could either pull up your chat and tell us your name, or unmute yourself and let us know who you are. Please. Somebody on an iPad. Okay, we're just going to give you a second more to please let us know who you are if you're on an iPad. Thank you, Terry, for putting your name in. You're unmuted, but I can't hear your name on
Linda
iPad.
Gantz. Hello? Hello?
Say your name?
Linda Gantz?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda.
Okay, you're welcome.
As we get started this morning, we're letting people in on Zoom and people are coming into the synagogue. If you would please pull your chat window up if you're online, we will be using the chat screen. Hopefully we can get some engagement and some questions and you can interact with me. And I'm going to turn it over to Anne.
Nobody else is on. We have to mute everybody else that's not speaking. Whoever's not speaking. Yeah. Linda Gantz. You can, if you're the host, you can do that. Yeah, mute everybody.
I had to unmute.
Yes, first we had to unmute.
No, so it's still doing that.
I've been working on it all morning.
You can't hear me?
We can hear you.
I can hear you.
To you?
Are you getting an echo, those of you on Zoom?
No,
No,
It's
Oh.
fine. The sound is fine.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending our kickoff meeting for adult education. My name is Ann Katz. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, this is my second year as chair of adult education at Temple Beth David. This is just for people in the room, some housekeeping. There's bottled water in the hallway that you're welcome to take. You can bring it in here. There's refreshments if you would just enjoy them out either in the hall or on your way home. Bathrooms are out this door to the left and then to the right. And then please turn off your phones as well. So last year for adult education, our theme was healing through Jewish values. We had a variety of speakers, all of whom were congregants of Temple Beth David, including 3 psychologists, a rabbi, social worker, a female engineer talking about overcoming obstacles during communist Romania, a book discussion, and classes taught by our scholar in residence, addressing healing through Jewish values, all from many different perspectives. If you are interested in viewing any of these prior programs, They are on Temple Beth David's website under Adult Education tab. This year, the Adult Education Committee sent out a survey to congregants asking for input on programming. Based upon the results, the committee decided to create the theme, creating a caring community. Each of our programs is targeting this topic, again, from many perspectives. Today, as I said before, is our kickoff program of 3 panelists addressing healing, hope, and heart. Before I introduce our spiritual leader, I would like to thank the Adult Education Committee for their commitment and support in making our programs happen. Brenda Kabler, Elaine Fleischer, Fern Chalero, Leslie Mandel, Linda Fain, Trina Fleischer-Pulliam, Cantor Daniel Ben-Simon, Rabbi Deborah Eisenman, Israela Meyerstein, our executive director and rainmaker, Bobby Sato, technical wizard, Danny Simpson, and newcomer and helping us today, newcomer to our team and helping us today, Gabrielle Ben-Chaim. It is now my pleasure and delight to introduce our spiritual leader. I say delight because she brings the light to us in every talk, song, and interaction she has with board members and congregants. She is originally from Allentown, Pennsylvania, and has called Palm Beach Gardens her home and Temple Beth David her family for 10 years. She studied music and gender studies at Oberlin College, and she earned both an MA in sacred music as well as in Jewish education from the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York City. Prior to her arrival at Temple Beth David, she held pulpits in New York at the Actors Temple, in Philadelphia with Temple Beth Zion Beth Israel, in Long Island with the Midway Jewish Center, and in Cleveland with Congregation Bethany. Not only does she strive, but succeeds to engage, inspire, and uplift the Jewish soul through prayer and song. She has helped coordinate and lead the first vibrant women's seders and meaningful healing services of the Jewish Theological Seminary. And she's also led them in synagogues throughout the New York region and has presented at various national conferences and conventions. Her signature Bima Band, composed of volunteer congregants and temple children, rocks the house wherever she is, and currently rocks at Temple Beth David frequently at Shabbat jams. And if you're walking along Juno Beach and you happen to hear singing and see dancing, come and check out her Temple Beth David Beach Shabbats. Passionate about chaplaincy, she worked in and outside of New York City hospitals such as Beth Israel Medical Center, Roosevelt St. Luke's, and the Jewish Home and Hospital of Manhattan, providing spiritual guidance and support and religious services. Yoga and meditation are her daily practices, and rescued golden retrievers her loves. But at the end of the day, her husband, Mark, and her daughters, Lila Rena and 2-month-old Lillian Rose, hold the key to her heart. Please welcome our beloved cantor, Danielle Ben-Simon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so happy to be here today with so many friendly faces on the screen as well as in person of our Temple Beth David family and friends. After a wonderful gathering of so many, about 150 people in person and almost 400 logged on live stream during the High Holy Days, it's so exciting to be here at the start of our adult education series. Our classes cover a wide range of current topics and are complementary to our mission at Temple Beth David, where we seek to enrich the lives of our community in an ever-changing world through the Torah and its teachings. The Slonimer Rebbe points out to us that the Torah begins with the Hebrew letter Bet, the first letter of Breshit, and ends with the letter Lamed, the final letter of the word Yisrael. Turned around, together they form the word Lev, Lamed Bet, which means heart. And as the Slonimer Rebbe teaches, from its beginning to its end, the Torah is hinting to us that God wants a person's whole heart. We began our review of the Torah this week, immersing ourselves in the story of creation, where light is brought forth from darkness and birds burst forth from the waters. Before long, humanity will appear, making choices and facing consequences. We read this Shabbat how just 4 chapters into our foundational story, we find the first act of injustice, fratricide. Hevel, the Hebrew name for Abel, Adam and Eve's youngest son, is murdered by his brother. In Hebrew, Hevel means breath or vapor. In an instant, Abel is gone from the story, evaporated like air. The Slonimer Rebbe suggests that in making offerings to God, Cain did not invest his heart in the offering he presented, while Abel shared what was most precious to him. And since, as the Slonimer Rebbe teaches, God wants our entire heart, this is what led to the confrontation between the brothers that left one less human on earth. Less than 3 weeks ago, we knocked on our heart with the vidui, the confessional reminding ourselves of what it means to think and feel, not only for ourselves, but for those around us as well. The seat of wisdom to all the stories we encounter is the heart. The Torah reminds us each year to attune ourselves, not just to what is in front of us in the moment, but also to the larger context and potential of what might be. When we stood at the mountain ready to receive the Torah, there was an unknown expanse of future. And yet, we are taught that each individual stood together as one. Ke'ish echad belev echad, like one person with one heart. This is my hope for Temple Beth David, beginning now, this moment, with this breath, that we will be like one person with one heart. Let our cup run over with love, compassion, devotion, and truth from our heart. Kosi Revaya, Kosi Revaya, Kosi Revaya, Kosi Revaya, Kosi. My cup runneth over, and may it runneth over with compassion and love. I would like to now introduce our moderator for today, Trina Pulliam. Trina is president of Trinovations, a 26-year-old boutique consulting firm with a team of consultants focusing on the effectiveness of nonprofits and local governments. As a national Malcolm Baldrige examiner, for the past 8 years, Trina specializes in organizational improvement, strategic planning, and efficiency measures. In this position, Trina gives back to the country by leading teams through a rigorous evaluation process to help companies raise the bar to compete in today's economy. Trina's company also leads the Palm Beach chapter for Sidewalk Talk, a nonprofit community project changing the world one heart-centered conversation at a time. Safe Conversations and Sidewalk Talk teach and practice listening, empathy, and understanding, no matter the subject material. Trina has been with Temple Beth David for 15 years, and her son Jesse was a bar mitzvah student here and became bar mitzvah here. She has been to Israel 11 times. Please welcome Trina. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you so much for that lovely introduction and the fantastic way to begin today's adult education program. Thank you, Anne, for chairing, and welcome everyone in person and online. Thank you for allowing us to really help move community forward, one heart-centered conversation at a time. So today we will help move community forward with 3 speakers. I have the honor of not just introducing them, but I also have the honor of moderating today's panel. So we have 3 amazing speakers. The way that I'll do this is I'll introduce all 3 of them, and then I will ask a question that each one of the panelists will have between 8 and 10 minutes to answer. And unfortunately, in my bio, it doesn't actually say what is my big talent of who I am. And my big talent is that I interrupt well. So I am going to interrupt the speakers in order to move the program along. And we've had several walkthroughs and dress rehearsals. So we'll be able to move the program. We don't want to keep you here all day. We have roughly the next hour plus. And so after the panelists, one at a time, answer questions, I will also be monitoring the chat screen for questions so that when we're ready for Q&A, I can moderate that. And if anyone live in the room has a question, if you'll write it down, Anne can pick it up, and then we can moderate that online so that it goes into the speaker for Zoom, because we are recording this for later use. So that's the way the program will work. Again, I encourage online chat. So those of you who are online, please pull up your chat screen. You can talk to the room so that everyone can be engaged. So if you just type in chat, we can, and I'll answer questions and I'll be engaged in chat as well. So that's a little bit about how the program will be moved forward today. So I have the honor of introducing each of the speakers. I'll introduce them in the order in which they will speak. So the first speaker who will talk today is Dr. Bernie Siegel. So Dr. Siegel, I'm really excited to hear Dr. Siegel speak. He prefers to be called Bernie, so I'm going to introduce him as that. He is educated at Colgate University and Cornell University Medical Center. He is the member of a bunch of different things, all of which I will not read out loud. But what's really fantastic about, and what I'm so excited to hear about, is his exceptional empathetic viewpoint as he started in 1978 with cancer patients. As I read his bio, one thing that came that just was blaring is a word that I have not used, but I'm going to use, and I will give Dr. Siegel credit from now on. It's called carefrontation. I love that word, carefrontation. He's the author of several books, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, Peace, Love, and Healing. He's all about humanizing medical education. He wrote a book in 1998 called Prescription for Living. He's got a couple of different kids' books. One is a parenting book called Love, Magic, and Mud Pies. So that's super interesting. And then he has a book called The Art of Healing. And so I'm very interested to hear what he has to say about healing. Our second speaker is Israela Meyerstein. And Israela is educated at Columbia University School of Social Work. She has an MSW. She has taught and supervised family and couples therapy in graduate and undergraduate academic and clinical settings. She is the author of Bridge to Healing, Find Strength to Cope with Illness. She has a strong connection to Israel, and as such, that led her to write Miracle Nation, 70 stories about Spirit of Israel. So again, super excited to hear her perspective. And our third speaker is Michelle Rosenthal. She is also an award-winning author. Her topic is really centered around trauma and PTSD. She's a health blogger for stress management. She's a certified coach, certified hypnotist, and a licensed master practitioner of NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, something that's a bit near and dear to my heart as well. So she is the author of 3 books, and she, again, focuses on surviving through traumatic events. Now, what keeps this group of people fascinating for me is they all know each other. They all live in different parts of the world. And Bernie has endorsed both the books of both Israela Meyerstein and Michelle Rosenthal. So they're connected even though they're from all different parts of the country. They're all online with us today. And again, I'm just super happy to hear from all of them. So I am going to start my our panel with Bernie. And again, he embraces a philosophy of living and dying that stands at the forefront of medical ethics. And his interest is in spiritual issues as well as how society grapples with the challenges that we have today. So Bernie, as a medical doctor, you progressed and transformed your advice into a more holistic perspective. How does this translate to health and wellness as we transition from COVID, hopefully sooner rather than later, to re-enter into a safe and compassionate world? Can you give us some tips on that?
Well, let me say that part of the problem is that most people become a physician in order to treat a disease and not a person. What are you making faces for?
Hang on one second, Bernie, as we figure out how. Okay. I hate to have you start again. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's no problem. You ready?
It was working before.
No, that's us.
I'll try now.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Yes,
Yes.
I'll tell you something. I have a crazy sense of humor, but what I love to do is get up in front of the microphone and go, and then everybody goes nuts trying to adjust everything because they think, and I love it when you have technicians in the booth, you know, working on everything. And they want to kill me when they realize I'm kidding, but they're in a booth, so I'm safe. But what was your question again?
So I'll repeat the question. How does your holistic approach and perspective from a medical doctor,
All right. Well, I'd say, okay, you got my mind back again. That Jung said this probably a century ago. The diagnosis helps the doctor, but it doesn't help the patient. For there, the key thing is the story. For it alone shows human background and human suffering. And only at that point can the doctor's therapy begin to operate. And whether that's COVID, cancer, or multiple sclerosis or anything else, the doctor is too interested in the diagnosis. And I may add, doctors are not taught how to deal with feelings that patients have or they have. Suicide rate in doctors is higher than the general population. And when you ask medical students, draw yourself working as a doctor, and that some of this is in my book, The Art of Healing, lots of drawings, but draw yourself working as a doctor. One group of medical students, out of the whole class, only one put a patient in the picture. Everybody else was in an office with a diploma on the wall behind them. So remember that when you go to a doctor, make sure you become a person. Bring them a gift, find out when their birthday is, bring them a card. Then you get remembered as a person. And the other is also ask yourself, how would I describe what I am going through? Now, I didn't say what's your diagnosis. I said, how would you describe what you're going through? A woman about to be admitted to the hospital with severe pain said pressure. I did a meditation with her to bring up what is the pressure in your life. And then I left her. And the nurse came over to me about 15 minutes later and said, it's her marriage, her headache's gone, she's going home to straighten out her marriage. Another woman with cancer said that it was failure, what she was experiencing. I said, how does failure fit your life? Well, my body failed. I said, your life. Oh, my parents committed suicide when I was a child, so I must have been a failure as a child. So I'd say whenever you run into a problem, always ask yourself, what word would I use to describe this? And then what in my life fits that word that may be contributing to my being sick at this time? And this is not about blaming you. Oh, doctors used to yell at me. You're blaming your patients. You ask them what's going on in their life. Yeah, that's to make you think about why they get sick now. Monday morning, we have more heart attacks, strokes, suicides, and illnesses. Why? Because of how you feel about Monday. And the healing part is not in guilt, blame, and shame, not in God punishing me. God is not the problem. I know a woman who went home to die of cancer, came back to our office with no sign of cancer. I said, tell them what you did. I left my troubles to God. That was her simple answer. And what she is doing is healing her life. So I can tell you stories about lots of people who went home to die. But in doing it, they thought, well, how do I want to spend the last few months of my life? I'm going to close my law office and play my violin because I never wanted to be a lawyer. That's my parents' idea. I'm moving to Colorado to die in the mountains. I'm getting a dog. I'm buying a house on the ocean in Miami. Yeah, there was a fellow, oh, I wish I remembered his name. Some of you might have known him. He was supposed to die in a few months, live for over 5 years. And he came to introduce me when I was speaking down there in Miami. And he was dressed in an outfit that it's like, why do you dress like that for? You're getting up on a stage in front of hundreds of people. And he said to me, when they tell you you're going to be dead in a few months, you cancel the dress code at work. And he taught his hospital a lot. And when I called up to ask why I wasn't invited to the funeral in Colorado, the fellow I thought had died answered the phone. And he said, it was so beautiful here, I forgot to die. So spend your life doing what God put us here. You know, be an instrument of God. I'm on the board of directors of heaven. I'm going to give you all a big break right now, because when you get to heaven, you get on the admission line. And I was watching the first time I was there. This guy came up to the head of the line, said, I'm a New York lawyer. When they said to him, how do you want to be introduced to God? And when he said that, they said, come back when you know who you are. The next person said, tell God his child is here. And they said, okay, come on in. And remember, you are, in a sense, an instrument of God. So spend your life being God's right arm and do what God would do in a certain circumstance. And you'll give yourself a gift as well as the people around you. What I call it is being a love warrior. What do you mean by a love warrior? Next time somebody is annoying you, say, I love you. All right? It's about how we're parented. If you know God loves you, that helps. But if your parents are abusing you and don't love you, study of Harvard students, 98% had suffered a major illness by middle age. If they said while at Harvard, my parents loved me, 24% had suffered a major illness. Believe me, the major factor in life is feeling loved. And I will give you, you might say, the commandments I learned from my parents. Ma, I had a horrible day at school today. I don't know what to do. God is redirecting you. Something good will come of this. Ma, did you hear what I told you? Yes, God is redirecting you. Norman Vincent Peale's mother used to say, God, if Norman slams one door further down the corridor, another will be open. So then you come home and say, I need to make a decision. Something came up today. All right, do what makes you happy. I need some help. What's the best thing to do? Do what makes you happy. And I found that with people with life-threatening illnesses, even putting stickers on their refrigerator. When you live in your heart, magic happens. So follow your heart. And my father's father died, leaving of tuberculosis with no insurance way back when, 6 children and a wife. And one day I heard my father being interviewed, and he said, one of the best things that happened to me was my father dying when I was 12 years old. And when he was home that night, I said, what the hell are you talking about? What you went through to survive. He said, yes, but it taught me what was important about life. And he spent his life helping others. And remember that too. Be forgiving. That's something I really learned from him. There are a lot of people who have hurt me and wounded me, but I forgive them and I am free. So keep working on that rather than I'm right and they're wrong. And last, maybe but not least, and then I'll tell you why I'm saying all these things. There are what I call spiritual flat tires. That's like God is redirecting you, because when you're on the way to the airport and you get a flat tire, how would you feel if when you got to the airport late and missed your plane, you learned it crashed? There are a lot of people who were alive on September 11th because they had to do things they didn't want to do. I had to drop the kids off at school. I had to go pick up something for my wife and go shopping for her. And then I get there late. and realized I would be dead if I didn't have that extra chore. So don't judge the event. It's about finding, in a sense, the rhythm and what you're doing. And I've been reading the Bible the last few months, Oxford Full Complete Bible, page by page. And there's a lot of violence in it in the beginning. That upset me. But it's the healing part that, to me, makes the difference, and the faith. I'd say faith, hope, and love are what life is about. And the people who teach me are those who have problems. From a Helen Keller, how would you like to be blind and deaf from the time you're 3 years old? And you're not cursing God or mad at God. God is your friend, your helper. There's a fellow I met years ago named Max Cleland through Norman Vincent Peale. He picked up a hand grenade he thought fell from his belt, but it wasn't. It was a live grenade blowing off his extremities. And yet he was one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. Without all these parts of his body, but he wasn't angry and bitter. He was a lot like Helen Keller. And one other thing that Helen Keller taught that I would teach you all, and don't forget it. You have to be blind or deaf tomorrow morning. Which would you choose? What's the right answer? Blind. Why? Because, as Helen Keller said, deafness is darker by far than blindness. We need to listen to each other. You want to be the biggest help to people in the world. When somebody comes into you and says, oh God, I've had everything go wrong. See, I didn't know that when my mother just listened to me. I thought, I used to go to my bedroom as a kid and talk to God and say, my parents are no help. You got to do something. I always shut the door because I thought if somebody said, who are you talking to? And I said, God, they said, come with me. You need to see a psychiatrist.
Well, Bernie, it sounds like you have used faith and hope and love to heal and help many, many people in your life.
But let me tell you the benefit of listening, because the most extreme that happened, the woman came in and just poured out all her troubles. And I didn't say anything because I had learned from Helen Keller. I just went, and she knew I was listening. And at the end of 2 hours, she said to me, that is the greatest conversation I've ever had with anyone. And I hadn't said anything. But what it is, you hear yourself when somebody else listens and they get the credit. So a good therapist listens to you until you hear yourself, and then they get the credit, because something suddenly happens. Keep a journal of your feelings. That is one of the most important things you can do. I'm still reading and rereading journals I have from 20 or more years ago. And don't forget the good things. Let me make sure I mention this to you, because my wife found my journal that I forgot to hide. And she said, there's nothing funny in your journal. I said, my life isn't funny. And then she told me funny things that happened in the hospital or even at home that I would tell them at the dinner table, all these stories, and everybody'd be laughing. We have 5 kids. And they never got in the journal. So don't forget the good things that happened too. And you can thank those people. But
So here's what I've gotten out of what you just said. First of all, be a love warrior.
Right.
And one technique to do that is listening and really hearing well. The 2 other things I got is humorize our experiences as appropriate and humanize our experiences as appropriate. So thank you so much for some of those tips. I also will walk away with don't judge the event, which is
right. You don't know what the future brings. I might add to your list, get a pet. You will live a longer, healthier life with a pet. And don't judge. I mean, to me, because somebody's another religion. The problem isn't the religion. The problem is the people. I call God loving, intelligent, conscious energy. Now, I mean that in the sense of what God needs in order to be a creator: love, intelligence, consciousness, and energy. And all those
So you
things go
mentioned
into it.
that one of the big things that a therapist will do is listen.
Yeah.
And that helps me introduce and turn the microphone over to our next speaker, who, as I mentioned, has been counseling families, couples, and individuals for many, many years.
I have to tell you one more thing. I have to. When I was 4 years
Okay,
old,
you can
I'll
speak
make
for
it
30
quick.
more seconds and then I'm gonna mute you,
All right.
Bonnie.
At age 4, I almost choked to death on a toy. I left my body. A few years ago, somebody said, "You're so busy. Why are you living this life?" I went into a trance, had a past life experience, which included my wife. I learned I have an angel. People have seen him. And one day when I spoke at a Christian funeral, Al Gawarl, the mystic, came up to me and said, "Are you Jewish?" I said, "Why are you asking? I spoke at a Christian funeral." "No, there's a rabbi standing next to you." And she described my angel that I met in a meditation. His name is George. He does the talking. That's why I get into trouble.
And you gave me permission to interrupt George.
Right.
You did give me permission to do that.
So it's okay. I'll stop.
Well, we do appreciate the tips, and I did take some notes. I'm going to continue to monitor the chat screen in case there are questions from our online audience. And we do have people live here today who may have some questions for you momentarily. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn it over to Israela Meyerstein. Okay, so Israela, I've asked you to unmute, and I'm going to ask you.
You hear me
So
now?
as a therapist,
Okay.
what insights from Jewish tradition on illness, trauma, healing strengthen us as individuals as well as our community?
Thank you very much for having me. And it's wonderful to be on this distinguished panel. I don't have to go through what it's been like for all of us in different ways over the past few years, but perhaps describing it as a long, dark, and narrow tunnel, facing an enemy, an illness that triggers fear, terror, and death for many has been pretty overwhelming. And not only that, but the amount of anxiety we carried. How many of you remember being on a computer for hours trying to locate your first vaccine? And another thing that we've dealt with all the time has been isolation, and that's not completely finished yet. But humans are a social species, and we've had to be separated from our loved ones. And it's made us afraid of strangers. We felt more alone. I remember there were many times I wanted to stick my hand through the computer screen when I was on a Zoom with my grandchild and touch them. So we've all experienced some degree of psychological trauma. And I wanted to talk about how Judaism can help us deal with these kinds of moods, these kinds of fears. So what I'd like to start with is to ask all of us to take a collective Jewish sigh or sighs in recognition of what we've been through thus far. So take a deep breath or several breaths and then release each one like this. Oi. And take a few of those breaths. Oi. It's really been a big oi. I'd like to share some insights from Jewish tradition that can offer some guidance during these difficult times. A Yiddish proverb states, "A small hole in the body produces a greater hole in the soul." Clearly, COVID has attacked the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. Our response, therefore, must be an integrated one. In Judaism, we say refuah shlema, and that refers for complete healing of body, mind, and spirit. Jewish tradition offers insights to help us on our journey. The psalmist of old, when facing overwhelming challenges, cried out of the depths I call to you, O God, please answer me with your expansiveness. I only see narrow, I don't know the answer. Give me expansiveness. I feel in a narrow place. And the word in Hebrew actually is Meitzar, and it comes from the word Mitzrayim, and that's where our ancestors were slaves. So the psalmist sought spiritual inspiration and practical steps to lift his spirit and expand alternatives. He also understood that healing must begin at the depths in order to reach the heights. Like the psalmist, we may be still feeling in a very narrow place, perhaps less narrow than a year ago, but still narrow. We know so many who have died and many who survived but haven't fully recovered. Others were traumatized watching and caring for family members and friends. So the challenge is, how do we maintain our spirits and recover in the face of trauma? Reb Nachman of Breslov, who was born in the late 18th century and faced a lifetime of illness and depression. He only lived till age 38, but he had much wisdom. He stated, each person walks in life on a very narrow bridge, Gesher Tsar Me'od. And the most important thing is not to fear or despair. Perhaps he was an early precursor of the song Bridge Over Troubled Waters. While fear is a normal reaction to great uncertainty, prolonged despair can distort a person's coping and ability to recover. Reb Nachman suggested that each of us must seek out personal coping tools. Luckily, Judaism has a treasure chest of spiritual tools such as prayer, psalms, stories, sayings, soothing melodies or nigunim, and wise insights that can help us during dark times. Perhaps it's because we've had many dark times as a people that our tradition has developed tools to cope. We also need to find ways to support others who are overwhelmed and need our help. Sometimes just letting them know they're not alone can be comforting. Although Reb Nachman lived way before the advent of cognitive therapy, he brilliantly understood and said, quote, "You are where your thoughts are. Be sure your thoughts are where you want to be." He also encouraged inspiring oneself with a melody or nigun because of the soothing effect of music. And today, scientific research confirms the healing power of music. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, a 20th century luminary, urged us to focus on gratitude as a coping tool because he believed that expressing gratefulness makes a soul great. If you can develop a daily practice of paying attention to even small little things that you do that are good or that happen to you, your spirits will likely lift. At the end of each day, try to reflect on things that happened that were positive. Give yourself credit for what you did or tried, and simply express gratitude for small positive events that occurred or for the people in your life. If the flashlight is pointed on the good, you will feel the light. Jewish tradition has a treasure chest of spiritual coping tools for those seeking inspiration. There are specific prayers that have to do with the functioning of the body. Asher Yatzar is about the myriad, gratitude for the myriad of vessels and channels in our bodies that must open or close for the body to function. Whenever I have my blood drawn, I close my eyes and I sing this Hebrew prayer every time while the phlebotomist is preparing her materials. As a seeming result, the phlebotomist seems to get a hole in one each time I say the prayer. In fact, I said that to one of the people that I always say a prayer, and she said, I say a prayer too. Lord, guide me to those veins. Another prayer, Elohai Neshama, is about the sacred breath that God breathed into each of us, reminding us of our holy nature as human beings. Psalms, nigunim, wordless melodies, sayings, and stories give us something to focus on during difficult times and can lift our spirits. You can also write your own prayer. The Psalm Min HaMetzar, out of the narrow straits I call to you, guides a person to search for wider alternatives when in a tight spot or narrow place. Singing it may be a first step in dealing with a situation of feeling stuck or cornered. You can print it on a piece of paper and take it out when you need it. Viktor Frankl, Auschwitz survivor and psychotherapist, reminds us that, quote, between stimulus and response, there is a pause. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. Our task is to seek coping tools that lift our spirits and help others. Here is a very brief prayer that could come in handy at just about any time. Grant me, O God, the strength to face each hour of this and every day. In fact, when it seems I cannot face even this hour, fill me with sufficient strength to face the next 5 minutes. Amen. Another useful prayer is the Hashkivenu, often said when we lie down to sleep at night. That's a time when we may be more aware of bodily aches and emotional fears. It asks for God to watch over us during the night of sleep and help us awaken to life in the morning. And I'd like to read it just because it's soothing. It's not too long. May we lie down in this night in safety and peace. May we wake each day to life and love. May we spend our days in your sheltering presence, protected from all evil, sadness, danger, and harm. May we journey through life in the shadow of your wings. O God of compassion, our shield and salvation, now and forever. Another message embedded in Jewish tradition is, it is not good for man or woman to be alone. Decades of social research confirm that community practices and social involvement are conducive to better health outcomes. Judaism is a religion based on community. Multiple voices joined together are stronger than individual ones. It's no accident that Jewish tradition requires a minyan of 10 people to constitute a praying community. Fortunately, many synagogues have done a good job of streaming services to allow us to feel connected to our religious leaders, worship practices, and fellow congregants, but it is still not the same as being in person. Judaism believes that Kol Yisrael Aravim Ze Bazeh. All Israel is responsible for one another. Judaism has numerous prayers that the community says on behalf of a sick person, such as the Misha Berach prayer, recited and sung in many synagogues. Or you can even read a Misha Berach prayer to your own healthcare professionals to bless their efforts. It was something I did from the gurney that I was lying on just before I went under for anesthesia for surgery. And they all said amen at the end. Benching Gomel is another prayer in synagogue to welcome back a person to the community after an illness, accident, or near miss. Although we may still be physically apart while at home streaming services, there are other ways to reach out to each other and even to people we don't know well through phone, email, or cards to let them know they're not alone. Did you know, by the way, that the word cure comes from the word care? I would like to summarize by sharing my MAPS perspective as a guide to help you navigate the journey. MAPS stands for M-A-P-S. M is for meaning. Don't blame yourself. It just wastes time. Rather, try to cultivate gratitude and fill each day with purpose. A is for agency. Consult your inner spirit. Be your own agent and speak up about your needs. If you're a patient, it's also okay to complain. P is for practical spiritual tools such as breathing, journaling, exercising, meditation, music, nature, poetry, prayer, just about anything that you know works for you to lift your spirits. There's even a special one for people who work in desk chairs at offices. It's called twisting out your stress. And S is for spiritual connections towards to a higher power or community. Make time for yourself and do something for others. Balance caregiving with caring. Now is a good time as any to think about what you need for yourself. to get across your bridge over troubled waters. Think of a spiritual tool that would be meaningful to you to turn to for inspiration or for a sense of peace, even for a short time. Perhaps singing Geshe Sarma Ode, A Narrow Bridge, could help. It could help us understand and identify others' struggles and strengthen our own convictions to cope. Thank you for your attention. Refuah Shlema to all, and be well.
Thank you so much. You've given us quite a bit to think about. And of course, we have some engagement on chat for those of you who are online. You want to pull that up, perhaps read the chat string that's going on. What I got out of that is for us to recognize our individual and community experiences and lots of different tools. Thank you for maps. Some of us and some of us in our community have had experiences over the last year and a half or last year and a few months that are somewhat traumatic. And so we have a trauma specialist, and I'd like to potentially hear what Michelle Rosenthal has to say from a trauma and stress management perspective. And we will add to our toolbox today so that all of us here and online, walk away with lots of different daily and community practices for our lives. So Michelle, how does trauma impact individuals and the community? You need to unmute.
Thank you so much, Trina, for that introduction, and thank you, Anne, for pulling all of this together, and Cantor Danielle, and Bernie, and Israela. I feel so fortunate to be going last because I have had the beautiful experience of being able to listen to each perspective, and I'm a note taker, so you may have seen me. I'm writing all over this page, circling, highlighting. There's some really incredible things that have been said from the Cantor, kicking us off with that idea of being like one person with one heart, which I think is really so important and such a challenge during traumatic times. And, you know, Bernie being, Trina, you mentioned to be a love warrior. And one of the things that I loved that Bernie said was when you live in your heart, magic happens. I know as a trauma survivor myself, what happened magically, and I have a pet, Bernie, and my pet saved my life from a hope versus despair perspective. So I know how important that is. And Israela, you said that beautiful normalizer, right? Fear is a normal reaction. And so I'd like to start there because I think so often we have a tendency to not really identify or understand what trauma is. I used to have a podcast for several years and I interviewed all of the leading neuroscientists, neuropsychologists, trauma experts about trauma and recovery. And here in Florida, just a little bit north of us, there is a place called The Refuge, a healing place. It was founded, it's for trauma recovery. It's founded by Judy Crane. And when I interviewed her on my podcast, she offered this terrific baseline definition of trauma. And I love this as a starting place because it levels the playing field for us all. We all have a tendency to compete or judge. My trauma is worse than yours, your trauma is worse than mine, so I do or I don't deserve to feel the way that I feel. But Judy Crane said to me that the baseline definition of trauma is any experience that feels less than good. And when you look at trauma from that perspective, before COVID, we were all trauma survivors already, because there's not a person on the planet that hasn't had some experience that is less than good. And the reason that I like to begin there is whether we're talking about the impact of trauma on an individual or a communal level, it's just good to remember we are all in this together, regardless of our individual experiences. No matter how you personally experience this pandemic or any other kind of stressor, the level that it is at for you is the level that it matters to you. And so I want to just begin this conversation by excusing my therapy dog in training. He's just one. And no matter how many times I have told him to be quiet, every now and then he pops up with his advice. So I work in my office with 2 therapy dogs. One's very well trained and one's in process. So my apologies. When we talk about trauma in community, and I am, Trina, I'm going to just steal the screen for a moment, if that's okay with you, because I'd like to share my screen. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I want to share this quick, this is just a quick, I just designed a quick 1-sheet page for all of us to sort of be able to very quickly and accurately start to identify how trauma operates on the communal level, how it affects the individual level, and then how do we heal in reverse from there. Because as we experience the pandemic as a community, we all have our own individual traumatic response, and then that goes out into the community and affects the community. Likewise, the community has its response, and that filters down to the individual level. So the question is, how do we heal when trauma is impacting us from the top down and from the bottom up? So here's where we're going to start. The primary ways that communities express a trauma response as a group, and I've been studying and reflecting on this as far back as all of the other prior to COVID-19, the mass shootings, the bombings, of course we have 9/11. If you look at all of these different experiences, as a group, as a community, the first thing that happens is the focus shifts from love to fear. And I'm not commenting on how much love was in the community before then, that has varying levels, but almost in an instant, the community, and you see this in the media as they lead our community as a global community, very quickly goes into that fear mode. And then each person's individual fear response picks that up and runs with it. So we all know that from the ages of 0 to 7, we model our external world, the people around us, your parents, your extended family, teachers, and such, and how they respond to fear or stress becomes a part of your DNA and your response. So you may be unconsciously exhibiting somebody else's fear response, but it activates within you depending on what happens in external events. And then your response goes out into the community that you're in. Now, when that happens, we drop down to the second point here, which is opposition and isolation. Each person's individual perspective becomes how they see a very communal experience. And that in itself causes polarization. And you can just see that in America very easily, as we all have in the past 18 months. And continuing, frankly, I run a professional holistic organization. And even in that very tight-knit community, the polarization, the opposition and the isolation within a very strongly knit, like-minded community has been immensely vast and diverse, which was surprising to me at first. But when that happens, then you see this contraction of the community into bits and pieces, whether that's in an economic sense or a social sense. The opportunities contract, and the experience of the community as a whole gets very fractured and segmented. Now, what's happening on the lower level of that is on the individual side, there's a great disconnection that can happen. Fear disconnects us from our internal resources. It disconnects us from what Bernie was talking about so eloquently in his presentation and also in the chat, our ability to connect with our heart, with our sense of love. We stop leading from love and we lead from fear. And that disconnection from love and from our empowered resources, if you will, it has a huge impact on how we integrate or not with the communities in which we live and in the community of Temple life as well. So from there, you start to lose your deeper connections with others around you, which only expands isolation, which leads to loneliness. It's easier to become depressed, experience despair, and a sense of foreboding. And then that's when we start to see mental health issues start to emerge. I think we all can agree, and Israela, I'm sure you're already seeing this in your work, that the next pandemic is going to be a mental health pandemic. And I for one, already believe it has begun as we start to see some of the research coming out specifically around mental health and COVID-19. So as we move forward, what do we do once everything's fractured and come apart? How do we start to put it all back together? And from my perspective, what I really love is to start on that individual level, because when we strengthen ourselves as individuals, when we help each other one-on-one, reconnect to that heart space, reconnect to those internal resources. And as I'm always telling my clients, there's one path, and here's how you have to walk it. You start feeling powerless, and you have to cross that bridge to powerful. How do we do that? And in my perspective, we do that through these three levels: control, change, and create. We have to relearn in some cases, or remember how to control our internal reactions to external events. So while things may be frightening and disturbing, we get to choose. You get to choose your response to those events, and you get to choose your response, not somebody else's not somebody else's response. I have a client, literally, we were just talking about this last week, unrelated to COVID-19, but something else in her life. And she was saying, well, I just do what my mom taught us, which is dramatize everything, catastrophize everything, and then just go crazy with your emotions. And I said, well, how's that going? Because that's the whole reason we were together, is that it does not work. It's not healthy. So you have to choose how you're going to reclaim control over your internal response. And a lot of times that choice, which can be made in a multitude of ways, moves you into level 2 here, which is to change. And really we're changing the meaning of the trauma story. We're changing the meaning of who you are in that fearful situation. And then after you change several aspects of that, it's moving yourself into that place where you can create your new identity in this new world that you live in. And from there then, and I'll start to wrap up here, but it's when healing begins that deeply on the individual level that you can start creating and really empowered and proactive, powerful post-trauma identity, that we then get to take that back into the community and start healing on the community level through these levels of reconnection, revitalization, revision, where the community starts to come back together, healing the fractures, healing the disconnections, and creating a new vision for how we all move together in this new reality. And from there, being able to focus in a concentrated kind of way, what's the new mission of our community? If we were in a specific mission before this, for example, pandemic, what's our mission now that this pandemic is here and it's here to stay and it's changed our world? How do we rally around a new mission? And once you decide as a community how to do that, then how do you create those new experiences of collaboration that allow you to emerge new partnerships, new social connections, and new experiences and opportunities for expansion on the community level? So, quick overview there. Lots to sort of chew on. I'm happy to share this page as a resource for anyone who wants it. You can just reach out to me at mytraumacoach.com. Just shoot me a note. I'll send this to you. And I think also, and I'll leave you with this one last thought, which is starting to change on the individual level starts with control, right? So it's being able to get back inside your own mind and start controlling how it works. And you can do that through a lot of methods, a lot of brain training, which I'm happy to share ideas on if anyone has questions about that. Even on my website, there's a free MP3 that starts to train your brain for peace and calm. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on how all of us, Bernie, Israela, and Trina, how we all and you joining us here this morning can start a movement as a community to move out of fear and back into love.
So thank you so much for your comments, your tools. We have one question on chat, and I'd like to find out if anyone who's live has a question that I might read for the speakers. So the
Trina,
question on chat is about sort of the polarization that occurs in our community. And I'll start with you, Michelle. How do we sort of decrease that polarization between friends and family that's going on?
Great question. Great question. So I'll offer two ideas right off the top of my head. First of all, a large perspective that I have from my professional training is that every quote unquote bad behavior starts with a really good intention. So if you think about, for example, we have a huge opioid problem here in Florida, right? So anyone who is addicted to any of those kind of substances, they didn't start out wanting to get to this place of being completely addicted and unable to function and the damage and the trauma that brings to their family. They started out with the good intention of feeling good because something felt bad. Now, why do I start there? Because I think in every polarization, it's very easy for us to all judge. Like, here's my perspective and your perspective is the opposite and it's wrong. Well, I would invite everyone to take a step back out of your perspective and see the polarized perspective for what it is. I'm not saying to embrace it. I'm saying to simply be curious about it, observe it, and ask yourself, what is the good intention inside that person or that community's perspective, so that we can start to stop reacting from our own internal perspective and start expanding our ability to see the larger picture and pass. Well, I didn't mean this as a pun, but for all of us, you can pass over the judgment of the negative perspective of the polarization and try to see what's just behind it, because it's usually some fear that somebody's trying to get away from. And if you can better tap into and understand their fear, you may be able to find a way to speak and connect with them in that space, which is much easier. So that's one idea. And the other way to decrease that polarization is to, and I know this is hard, step out of the space of wanting to be right. Because in this arena, there is no right, there is no wrong. There is only meaning, and there only is perspective. And as my husband's always telling me, everything is always a function of perception. And so I think it's really important to remember that perception plays a key role here. And the perception that you have is your internal frame. And so you may want to check in with your frame and decide what in my frame of reference is getting activated here, and is it serving me? And what could I activate instead that would allow me to be more neutral so that I can deal with this from a place of response rather than reaction? I think there's so much to be said here, but I'll pause there. And let
So thank you so much for that
Can I
perspective.
add something, Trina, please? What you have to remember is we're all wounded. You want to change how the world treats you and you respond to others, put a bandage on and go out tomorrow. I was poked in the back in Stop and Shop. I turn around, there's a lady with a bandage over her eye. This is her quote. "You're the only person in Stop and Shop who hasn't asked me what happened." Everybody is talking to her and getting into therapy because she's wounded, and then they can talk about their wounds. Now, Crazy Siegel knows about the value of humor. So I said to her, I know what happened. I have an abusive spouse also. And then she gave me a look. Literally, when I go into stores and people say, how are you? That drives me freaking crazy. They don't want to know how I am. I tell them, don't say that. Say, you're looking well today. I don't want you to say, how are you anymore? When they do say, how are you? I say, I'm depressed. I'm out of my antidepressant and my doctor's on vacation, so I can't refill my prescription. I am offered antidepressants by the people in line. And the other day was a new one. I got poked in the back. The person behind me was a psychiatrist who handed me her card and said, I specialize in depression. Maybe I can help you. And I busted out laughing, and everybody wonders, what's she laughing about? And I said, it's because I am not depressed. I am a doctor. We're all depressed in a sense. I'm saying that because I'm tired of everybody lying about what's going on and denying their needs. So talk about it. Don't be afraid to wear your bandage and show it. And don't give up on humor. People who laugh for no reason every 3 hours in a study had a better survival rate, these were cancer patients, than a group who just laughed if something funny happened. So you want to live a longer, healthier life, laugh every few hours for no reason. Yes, it changes your body chemistry. Let me say this, actors were studied. Drawing blood in a comedy, drawing blood in a tragedy. Immune function up in the comedy, down in the tragedy. Stress hormone levels up in the tragedy, down in the comedy. And they're only acting. So act as if you're the person you want to be and rehearse and practice until you get it right.
Thank you so
I'd like
much. I
to-
want to ask
I'd like-
Israela if she had a comment on that.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on what Bernie was just saying, and I admire Trina's description and sort of laying bare what's really going on when we're having these reactions to people. Sometimes we don't have the higher self to step back and see them in a better light. And so I would say for those who find themselves in that situation, you can fall back on your own code of how one should behave and how one should be the better. How can one be a better person in terms of either listening a little bit, and when you find you can't anymore, you remove yourself, or you find that something's getting you very triggered. Maybe you need to say, what do I do now to take care of myself? What's the best thing that I need to do here to take care of myself? Being in that environment where nobody's going to change anybody's opinion, or removing myself and doing something that is more calming and soothing to my own health. So I think there are many different approaches. Each person has to find what works for them in terms of honoring their inside soul. Sometimes it's going to be stretching to listen better, and other times it's going to be removing themselves and then getting involved in something that soothes their soul and that lifts their spirits.
One other
Thank you.
simple thing, notice, except I think I saw one male name. I don't know if it's a male or somebody just using that name, but where are the men? Say, women live longer than men with the same cancers. Women say things like, I can't die till you're all married and out of the house to their children. Men sitting with their wife and children in my office have said, there's no point in living, I can't work anymore. So try to help the men pay attention to feelings, not just things that they can do.
Yes, thank you. So we do have a few men in the room, so thank you so much for being here. We have just a few minutes left of our program this morning, and I take two pieces of information out of this. As I've posted lots of different things on chat, I've summarized the things that all the speakers have said. We've asked the questions that have been put out there. And two things that I'm personally going to walk away with. One is assume positive intent. So when I'm potentially in a situation where we have had lots of hard times, polarization, and even almost trauma in our world, I am going to assume positive intent. And then the second thing is to be curious, not furious. Be curious, not furious. So that's the two things that I personally got out of it today. I am unbelievably thrilled and happy and honored to have moderated and been present while we have had our first of the year adult ed program. We do have a raffle. Each speaker has been gracious to provide books. So we are thankful for that. And I'm going to turn our program back over to Anne to do the final wrap up. On behalf of the people in the room and online, thank you so much for participating in today and a few more minutes.
I had a few things to say as a wrap up, and all that came to my mind after listening to our three panelists was what a gift we have all received today. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your brilliance, all three of you, your brilliance with us, your humor, your inspiration, your knowledge, your wisdom with us today. And thank you, Trina, for leading us through this and wrapping it up and doing such a beautiful job as a moderator. So now to the raffle. So Cantor, I was going to have you pick it, but is she awake or is? I know. Would you like to, or I can do it? I don't know if I can think. So we actually have everybody's name who signed up. And oh, look at this. Come on screen. Look at this baby. She's 2 months old. She is absolutely gorgeous. So I think I'm going to have to just, yeah, there you go. Okay.
Hi, Cantor Ben Shimon.
Can't do that one.
Okay. She's beautiful.
Brenda Cabler gets our first book. Brenda, are you on there? I don't see. Brenda will give you Michelle's book. It's wrapped. I have it wrapped, so I can send it to you or give it to you when you come back to South Florida. Our second winner is Renee Kessler. Renee, are you there still? Yes, you are. I will give you Bernie's book. Yes, our three panelists, by the way, have graciously autographed each one of their books, although they've all written many than just one book, but they have given them to us to raffle off. And we one more.
I'm here. Thanks, Ann. Thanks, Bernie, for the book.
You're welcome.
Robin Goldberg.
Mom is there,
Linda.
Linda Goldberg. Yep.
Yes, we're here.
Hi. Hi, Robin. And
Hello, how are you? Thank you so much.
Israela
everybody.
Meyerstein's book we are going to give to you, Robin.
Thank you so
I will
much.
get your address from the office and we will send it to you,
Great.
unless you're local.
Right now she is.
Okay,
Pick it up.
yay,
Great.
thank you. So I just want to let everyone know that our next adult education program begins on Tuesday, October 12th at 7 p.m. All in the Mishpucha is the name of it, led by our scholar in residence, Rabbi Deborah Eisenman. This class will explore complicated family dynamics in the Torah and will relate them to managing our modern day lives. This will lead up to our Tuesday, November 9th program held at 7:00 p.m., targeting practical methods to research your family history and genealogy. This program will be presented by a Westport friend and historian, Howard Matson. On Sunday, January 9th at 10 a.m., Josephine Gahn from Jewish Community Relations Council, or also known as the JCRC, will be presenting a program on anti-Semitism now. Also in January, Rabbi Deborah Eisenman will be conducting 2 presentations, one on ancient roots of anti-Semitism, and then she will also lead a 3-session class entitled Building Blocks of a Compassionate Kehillah, or Compassionate Community. Please contact me or Temple Beth David for additional information about the synagogue or this year's adult education programming. Thank you so much again for your attendance. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Trina and Gabby, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone in this room for coming.